There's one thing I like about political scandals in terms of being somebody that is looking at them from the outside, somebody who doesn't have any stake in such scandals, somebody who is just watching the show go on, and that is that they tend to snowball and get more and more and more ridiculous until it all finally comes to an end. And we are currently witnessing that happen in South Korea at the moment. Quick refresher for those of you that might have forgotten, but at the start of this month, the Korean president, or former president rather, President Yoon, made a very interesting decision when it came to trying to hold on to political power. President Yoon was incredibly unpopular. We're talking about like 17% approval rating level of unpopular. And you got the sense that the walls were really closing in around him. There were investigations into whether or not his wife was engaging in stock market manipulation. He was currently under investigation for many number of things. Members of his party were under investigation for impeachment. It was not looking good for him, and he suffered a landslide defeat in the country's midterm elections, and the opposition party had unbelievable control over South Korea's parliament. So somewhat abruptly, President Yoon at the start of this month declares, oh, you know what? North Koreans have infiltrated the country and they are infesting the left-wing opposition party. So he declares martial law and basically tries to shut down parliament. Now, I've done a whole deep dive into that in a previous video, specifically about how Yoon failed to overthrow parliament and his martial law declaration was rescinded. So go watch that. But to put it pretty simply, he failed in an incredibly astronomical way. Yoon had no political allies at that point. His own party was not informed by him that he was going to do that. So even they wanted him gone. And well, he was kicked out of office. His party and the opposition party, well, enough of them came together and voted for his impeachment, and he was removed from office. And then about 2 weeks ago, in his place, the prime minister became the acting prime minister. That was also a member of President Yoon's party. So a party member of his becomes the acting president, and we assume that the situation is somewhat taken care of from there. I mean, Yoon will have a trial with the Supreme Court to see whether or not his impeachment was valid, but from there it seemed like the waters were really calm. That was until this morning. I was very confused this morning when I woke up to notifications from like the BBC, from CNN, even from like Australian media outlets, with basically headlines popping up and saying that the South Korean president has been impeached. And I kind of stopped for a minute and I was like, yeah, that happened 2 weeks ago. What are you talking about? And then when I got the fourth notification that the South Korean president has been impeached, I thought, surely not. But then looking into it and seeing what actually happened today, the prime minister that was promoted to president to replace President Yoon has now himself been impeached less than 2 weeks after President Yoon himself was impeached. So South Korea has had 2 presidents removed from office in as many weeks. And it does actually make sense because the acting president, that was Han Duck-soo, he was formerly the prime minister. When President Yoon left, he became acting president. He was, let's put it this way, he was not exactly helpful in the efforts to investigate his predecessor. Now, acting President Han, who I'll just call President Han for the sake of simplicity, was not willing to play ball with Parliament, particularly when it came to how to deal with former President Yoon. The first issue was railroading and basically blocking any efforts to properly investigate the former president and what his wife was allegedly doing illegally. But the main issue has to do with the part of the impeachment process that relates to the Supreme Court and how Han was trying to sabotage that. When a South Korean president is impeached, they are immediately removed from office, but that's not the end of it. They then have to go before the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court evaluates the merits of them being impeached. And from there are 9 members on the South Korean Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has to make a ruling. They have to have at least 6 of them confirm that the impeachment was legitimate. If they don't have 6 Supreme Court justices agree that the impeachment was fair, then the president goes back into office. So basically, if 4 members of the South Korean Supreme Court say that the impeachment wasn't valid, that it was wrong and unjustified, then Yoon, the former president, could suddenly come back into office. But this is where the controversy kicks off, because Currently on the Supreme Court, there are only 6 members and there are 3 vacancies. So the opposition parties in charge of Parliament basically want to get all 3 of those vacancies on the Supreme Court filled so that it's more likely that former President Yoon will basically be found guilty of his crimes and his impeachment will be confirmed by the Supreme Court and he will not be able to come back. But what Yoon and Han want is for there to only remain those 6 so that maybe if just one of the Supreme Court justices says that it wasn't valid, Yoon can become president again. So what has Han been doing? He's basically been blocking every proposal by the opposition parties in Parliament to appoint new Supreme Court justices. So Han, purely for political gain, or political gain of his predecessor, President Yoon, was refusing to put Supreme Court justices onto the court, leaving spots vacant. So what did the opposition party do? They impeached him for it. And now the finance minister will be taking over as the new president, whose name I haven't even learnt yet. In the span of 14 days, South Korea has had 3 presidents. The issue that I see here, and why I don't think this is quite over yet, maybe it isn't over yet, is the fact that they have to pull from cabinet to appoint new presidents. And those people are the people that are most loyal to Yoon and the people who are most likely to act in his interests. And subsequently, they're the people most likely to be impeached for those actions. South Korea's political system is being pushed to the absolute limit. 2 presidents have been impeached. One of them is going on trial for a Supreme Court, which is 1/3 empty. And it cannot have those vacancies filled because the new presidents that are being appointed are refusing to play ball with the opposition, which entirely controls Korea's parliament. It is a nightmare scenario for anyone who thinks about designing the constitution. As interesting as this situation is, there is a part of me that desperately does not want to see me doing a follow-up, because this is incredible to witness, but at a certain point you have to ask yourself, how much more off the rails can this really get?